Welcome everyone to today's masterclass on leveraging AI in human resources. My name is Caroline Rust. I'm from CTU Corporate Training Unlimited, the official host of today's session, and we've partnered with Professor Johan Stein. He's asked me not to call him Professor constantly because we've worked with him for quite some time, and I can definitely attest to the fact that he's a very approachable professional. Johan, I'm going to hand over to you to introduce yourself and just give some context to today's session. And I think then we can get things going.
Fantastic. Caroline, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for setting some time apart for this session. Obviously, AI is a hot topic, greatly misunderstood, huge benefits, huge downsides. So it's good that we understand it better. But just briefly from my side, I've got a management consulting background. I worked for some of our banks and some of our large consulting firms. And the last year and a half, I've done a lot of work in the training space, especially tertiary education and executive education. I still have some clients that I consult with when it comes to their AI strategy or automation strategy, and that includes some of our healthcare providers, our banks, our telcos, and others. And then a lot of speaking and writing, but I often say I approach this topic more as a father, worried about my son and his children's future if we don't get this right, than I do as a technologist. So that's basically the intro. I've actually worked in this field. I've implemented this technology. I often say that we shouldn't teach things that people can Google. We should teach things from our experience, where I've seen it gone wrong. Hopefully some of the mistakes that I have made or that I've seen some of my clients make, you can learn from and hopefully not repeat that. So it's about an hour and a half session. My intention is to leave about 20 or so minutes for questions and answers. And please, in the Q&A, as questions pop up, please pose your questions there. We're going to try and get to as many of them as we can. I think also the recording of this presentation and the slides will be made available after the event. Also, we've got 4 polls. We want to ask your opinion about how you're approaching this topic, whether you're approaching it at this stage at all or not. So Colleen will help me with that. And please feel at liberty to also pick from the poll questions. And so we can also see a trend. Where are most HR practitioners on this webinar or this masterclass in their journey? What I want to do today is I want to start off with a future view of artificial intelligence. I'm also going to explain it, demystify it a bit, try and make it simple, because it's a hugely misunderstood topic. I think if I ask 10 people their view about AI, I will have 10 very disparate answers. I think a lot of people fall somewhere on a spectrum of understanding this technology. On the one hand of the spectrum is total fear, thinking it's going to be dystopian, we're going to all lose our jobs, there will be killer robots roaming the streets. And we can thank Hollywood movies for that view. But what I've seen over the last year, especially since the great fame achieved by ChatGPT and other platforms, is that a lot of people have moved over to the other side of the spectrum, where they are now super excited about this technology, thinking it will create a total utopian future, which is possible if we do it right. But the problem with that view is that because we often don't understand the technology, we overestimate at this stage how smart it really is, because it is still fairly limited. And people tend to, and business leaders that I deal with, tend to see it as a real silver bullet. Let's just AI stuff. Let's just AI our finance department, our HR department, our procurement department, and so forth. And with some of the common sense tips I want to give you today, hopefully that will help you in approaching it correctly. So after speaking a bit about the future, which is unfortunately a scary picture, but it's not there to create fear, it's just to create a bit of a realistic view. I also want to talk about what is AI, as I said, explain it to you in terms that will make sense, that will help you also in your own decision making when your internal IT department or external vendors come to meet with you and they want to try and sell this AI stuff to you. Is it really AI? And do they even understand what they're talking about? And you as a business leader, even though we don't necessarily all have to become experts in this field, at least we need to be equipped with some basic principles to understand what these vendors or our IT department are speaking about and to make a business decision on the technology. Then I'm going to start talking about just some common sense ideas for all business areas around approaching this technology. And then toward the end, I want to talk through some of the key takeaways. And let me quickly bring up that slide. And you would have seen it in the, obviously in the marketing. I just want to bring up all of these. This is a huge topic. We only have an hour and a half. So these key takeaways, I'm going to go through it fairly briefly. But again, look at the recording, look at the slides afterwards. There's a lot of resources you can find that will explain more of some of these areas to you. Some of you might already be on a journey in some of these elements that you see here, whether it's your recruiting, your L&D areas, and so forth. So some of you might not have even touched it or thought about this journey, and that's okay. And that's also from the Q&As and the comments we can learn from each other. And then toward the end, I want to end off with the message of what now? Now that we've gone through some of the principles, what are our next steps? What do you as a HR and a business leader do tomorrow? Or what would I recommend you do after this webinar? So hopefully that'll be helpful. Hopefully it will also be practical. But I just want to warn again some of these things toward the end. I'm going to go through fairly quickly, but it could be food for thought. It could be a few ideas that you might say, I've never thought about this before. I didn't know that it was actually possible to do this with this kind of technology. And that can set you on your own journey. And then obviously work with the experts, the internal, external experts, but make sure that you drive the agenda and that the so-called AI experts don't pull wool over your eyes trying to sell you stuff that you don't need or that you don't need at this stage. So here's our first poll. And as I've said, remember, for those who feel at liberty to do it, and I want to encourage you all to do it, just give us your answer on this one. What is your current level of AI integration into HR? So it could be nothing, and that's okay. I wouldn't be surprised if most people answer that or limit it. But some organizations are further down the road already, and it's moderate or it's even extensive. So have a look at the screen, have a look at the poll in the chat that Colleen will post there. And then I'm just going to give it a minute or two to wait for some of the answers to come through. And then, Colleen, you can maybe just guide us on what are some of the trends that you see in the answers. So I'm just going to...
So, yeah, so far, most people are responding that they have limited integration. We've got one who's already said moderate, but the majority of responses up to now has been limited, no integration, and 2 who've mentioned moderate. But obviously, I've still got a few answers coming in. But it seems like there's a trend of limited to no integration.
And Colleen, that is aligned with global trends across all industries. And this is not just true for the HR function. You will see this similar kind of trends in other business functions across different sectors. In my experience, often in banking and financial services, many organizations are further down the road. One of the reasons is because there's a lot more funding available for these kind of initiatives and use cases than in maybe say in construction or manufacturing. But I think what we're seeing in the poll here is standard and relevant. So, and then the question is, if there's no or limited integration, what are the next steps? And hopefully this webinar will help with that. Any other comments, or is that pretty much the trend?
Yes, so Shane's actually given a valuable comment. He says, as an open-minded person, I would recommend that people actually use the technology first, instead of having a bias based on what was shown to us through movies and books.
Very true, Shane. I'm going to touch on that as well. You'll see one of the things I want to hopefully drive home in our time together is don't use AI and go look for problems to solve, because AI is limited in what it can solve. Forget the tech initially and look at the problems, because sometimes you need Excel, sometimes you need change management or better leadership in your organization, etc. But I think a lot of people, and a lot of my consulting work, it feels like about 80% of my work with clients is to try and re-educate them, given these biases from the movies and maybe what the global vendors told them to kind of sell all this technology to them, etc. One thing that AI will never replace, everyone, is your common sense and your experience. And I'm going to touch on that as we go along. It's still more relevant and more valuable than any tool, especially if you've been working in this field for, say, 15, 20 years. There are things that you know, that you've learned. Sometimes it's a gut feel due to your experience that AI cannot do. And again, that's hopefully one of the takeouts from this session, to have a better understanding of what it can do, because the things it can do, it does very well. But there's still that human expertise element. And I think once we get that balance right, the fear of AI, the fear of us all losing our jobs is a lot more balanced, knowing that it's not what Hollywood or certain vendors tell us. So very interesting. We've got 3 more polls as we go along. So let me go on to the next one. This is a story of one of the investment banks that I consulted with here in Johannesburg. And often the meetings that I'm called into starts like this. People around a boardroom table, and the question is, or the ask is, we want to use AI, or can we use AI, or show us how to use AI. And what I've now learned over the last 10 or so years, after I started focusing on artificial intelligence, is to firstly just stop the conversation and make sure we are all on the same page. Back to that point of 10 people will have 10 different opinions. And then I ask the audience, what is your understanding of AI? Let's just make sure we are comparing apples with apples here. Often they don't know how to answer it. It could be that they've just been talking about it, they heard the lingo and the terms. Some people could be quite opinionated. Sometimes they're right or partially right. But often I realize before we even start this conversation that people are greatly misunderstanding this tech. Global studies show that up to 80% of business leaders do not understand this technology. And it's becoming more and more of a business leader and a C-suite imperative, given the impact that it can have on our organizations, rather than just what I call the people in the dark corners of the IT department. So I sat in this meeting and we just started speaking. And what I often do with clients is I would say, if you would permit me, let's agree that for this next hour, no one is allowed to use any technology terms. Can't say AI, machine learning, Internet of Things, cloud computing, quantum computing, these terms that we throw around, and half the time we don't even know what we're speaking about. And as a management consultant, and having worked for big consulting firms, sometimes we don't even know what we're speaking about, but it's sexy to throw these terms around. So they agreed, no more technology terms. And I asked them about their day-to-day work's going, how they work together as a team. I also asked them on the whiteboard to give me a high-level view of their value stream. So from, say, if you think of recruitment, identifying a need, looking for the right candidates, obviously going through the CVs and resumes, setting up the interviews, the actual offer of employment, onboarding, and then obviously managing that cycle through L&D, etc., all the way to termination or retirement, etc. And I asked them to do the high level. In other words, give me 6 or 7 high level steps. And what I found in this meeting is that no one around this table, and there were about 12 people, could agree on what the main steps are in their end-to-end value chain. They started arguing with each other. I also then asked them, but who's responsible for step 1, step 2, step 3? And even then they were arguing with each other. And then I realized something, and this often happens in these meetings that starts with AI, is that their basic business processes were totally broken. The understanding of who's performing what kind of job, who is responsible for what. If I'm step 3 or 4 in the queue of this workflow, what is the impact on my work if you don't perform your work in time and pass it on to me? So that at the end of this conversation, the recommendation was that they have to go through an exercise of ways of working together as a team, and that we had to look at their basic processes. Because to just put AI on top of this would have been disastrous and it would have failed. And as I tell this story, think about your own organization. Now, every organization struggles with some of these things, understanding how we work together, who's responsible, even though we've got our KPIs and our RACI frameworks, etc. In the chaos of getting our work done every day, after time especially, it is so easy for that confusion to set in that, who's responsible for what, how do we work together, and what are the processes that we need to follow. So before you look at AI, just from a common sense point of view, Just step back, forget the tech. How are you working together as a team? How are you working with your internal or external clients? How are you using the technology you already have? I often say to clients, if you're not using Excel properly at the moment, forget about AI. Because you've got tools that you can already automate with. If you, for instance, a Microsoft client or a Google client or an AWS client, and you very probably already as a business have the licenses to use some of this advanced technology. But if you don't use that basic technology correctly, and if your team doesn't do it, then how are we going to just put the most advanced technology we've ever created, albeit limited, on top of what you're doing, and it's just going to work? It's not going to just sort out problems. I sometimes feel bad to invoice my clients for this kind of advice, but it's like they don't even think about it. They are starry-eyed about AI-ing stuff. So think about that. Use your experience, use your common sense. How's the team working together? Are your main processes established and mature before we even start looking at automating it, and before we even start looking at putting smart technology like artificial intelligence on top of that? This section, as I mentioned in the beginning, I want to just peer into the future a little bit. Now, the future of technology as it's going to impact us as humans is quite scary. Now, the one side of the argument, as I've mentioned earlier, could be utopian. There could be huge benefits to humanity across the world when it comes to access to services, economic equality, and so forth, healthcare, education. That's more of what we call a post-humanist view, which I'll touch on. The other extreme is that dystopian view, almost like a George Orwell 1984 view, if you've read his work. In other words, will it be total loss of control, total loss of privacy, complete surveillance, brain chips implanted, and so forth? And I think somewhere between those two extremes is the truth. But what I want to say through this section is that the more I see currently and into the future, how this technology will impact humans, people, our loved ones, people who work for us, excuse me, the more I realize the important role of HR professionals. So one of the messages I want to give you today is that as professionals, as you learn to understand this technology a bit more, as you apply your experience on top of that technology, your role into the future will become more and more critical, given the importance of people, and the value of people, and the great impact this technology will have on us. And let me take you through a few future trends. If you read the Business Day, I write for them weekly, and this was my article yesterday, it's on Wednesdays, is are we creating a new species of humans? And scientists and philosophers call it Homo artificialis. Obviously, we are Homo sapien. In our evolutionary history, we lived among other hominoids like Neanderthals, etc., 50 or 80,000 years ago. But what if the more devices we plant into our brains, into our bodies, the more our brains are connected to the internet? And this is not science fiction. This is already true. For instance, this year, the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA in America, gave approval for the first time that brain chips connected to AI devices could be tested and implanted into human beings. Up until now, it was tested on other primates, on pigs, for instance, etc. Potential benefits around Alzheimer's and other brain dysfunctional problems is huge. My question is, if you can plug into my brain, what about my privacy? What about reading my thoughts, but also what about influencing my thoughts? So just a few things. Post-humanism is one concept when we think about the future. This is more a altruistic view. In other words, we will be, through technological use in our bodies, we will have more longevity, we will be healthier, we will be more economically empowered. We will become, in a sense, more superhuman. The challenge with that view is that accessing this technology, because of the costs, will be limited to a small number of people on Earth. What will happen to the rest of us? If my son, who is 9, has to go to university one day or enter the workforce, and there are colleagues around him who, because of they might have been genetically engineered, or because of the brain implant, they are just so much smarter. They've got such an advantage over him. What will happen to the rest of us? There's an author called Yuval Noah Harari. Some of you might have read his work. His famous books are Homo Sapien, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, and Sapiens. And he's, as a philosopher, he's saying, are we creating what he calls a useless class of people? In other words, in the near future, and this might be 30 or 50 years from now, I don't know, could we out-automate almost every job that every human being is doing? And what will we then do? There won't be enough funding. You know, some people say we need to look at a universal income grant. Where will we get the money for that? You know, what kind of work will we do? And that's why I think we've got a challenge around our educational system, especially our tertiary education, is preparing young people for a future and for jobs that we almost can't imagine. And again, one of the messages I want to land here, this is not science fiction. This is already there. It's already possible. It's not widespread, some of the things that I'll talk about in this slide, but this is not a future view. It is a now view. I've mentioned it just now, brain-computer interface. Elon Musk, one of his companies is called Neuralink, and there are others who are, and you don't even need surgery. You need a small incision to insert a very small device. Sometimes they are about the width of a human hair into the brain, local anesthesia, and that person's brain can be hardwired. Again, from a healthcare point of view, potentially if you've lost your hearing, you can hardwire the brain through these signals, but the control you can have over your population tapping into their brains is a big concern. This is a reality, and I think we're going to see it more and more. This is scary, especially for parents. Artificial babies, gene editing tools. Again, this is already possible. We think that China is doing it, but there are also news reports, and in fact there was one this week about the Weizmann Institute in Israel. They managed to create a human embryo without an egg and without sperm. They artificially re-engineered the genes to create a embryo. And currently, the law across the world says you can experiment on human embryos as long as they are younger than 14 days. But what if that legislation changes? What if we can start experimenting on babies in the womb that's maybe 3 or 4 or 5 months old and growing in the womb already? So re-engineering the genetical code of babies. Again, what could be one of the benefits? It could be that, you know, we all have historical problems in our families. It could be cancer, heart disease, and other things. What if we engineer it out so that your child will not inherit those genetical weaknesses or diseases that you have in your family? But now, what again about creating a superhuman? Nietzsche spoke about the Übermensch. And obviously the Nazis used that totally wrongly. Imagine the Nazis had technology like this. But this is the other problem. We will have dictators in our world that will have access to this technology to control their populace. So what if the nature of humanity, of what it means to be Homo sapien, will change in the future? And I'm going to touch on that because I think in the next 30 or so years, HR functions will not only manage humans, it will manage non-human, artificially intelligent entities. So will we get to a point where we are no longer human resource managers, but digital resource managers? Something to think about. Regenerative medicine, organ creation. Imagine you can, on your app, create a new liver at Postnet and go and pick it up because it's 3D printed. Again, this will lead to longevity, but it will also only be focused on a small amount of our population across the earth. This technology is already there. We can even create a nice fillet steak artificially, and eating it, you won't even know it's not from a cow or another animal. So where is this taking humanity? And this one is important. Nanotechnology. A nanometer is obviously like a thousandth of a millimeter. We already have technology where what we call nanomedicine. And if you Google this, you'll see it is there already. It's limited in use, but you can have a little nanorobot inserted into your bloodstream. It's self-propelled. In other words, it can swim through your bloodstream to the area where there's cancer. It can also carry a very small load of medicine and actually deliver it into that organ that needs that medicine. So what if we get to a world where we've got 1,000 nanobots swimming through our bloodstream? Obviously looking for cancer, looking for disease, but What if those bots are hacked? What if they cause damage? What if they stop your heart beating? Augmented physically, intellectually, emotional capabilities. So I bet you some of you are sitting there, and I'm okay with that, thinking this is a lot of nonsense. This is typically science fiction. And there's most likely 3 or more slides I could have focused on this. This is where we are going, and it's scary, and it's at our doorstep. We will, in our lifetime, start seeing more and more of this, but our children and their children will definitely live in a world where we become different kind of species because of technology. That brings me back to why the way we manage people, look after people, care for people, help them grow, encourage them, is becoming more and more important because of the diminishing value of Homo sapien in the light of technological advance. This is something that I've not heard one HR team speak about yet. More and more of our teams are becoming complemented by non-human entities. So, and that could be a chatbot, a digital assistant, a digital twin, or other kind of AI-related tools. But what do we do when a new human being joins a team? We obviously onboard them, we introduce them, we make sure they are equipped to do their work. The other humans in the team get to know them, we try and all work together, etc. But when a non-human intelligence is introduced to work with a team, I have not seen, and some of you might be doing this, and it would be great to hear if you can put it in the comments. Do you have an onboarding process for a non-human intelligent agent to work with a team? How do you manage that non-human intelligent agent? I know some of my clients give, for instance, a robotic process automation bot. They will give them a staff number or a contractor number. So they will onboard them in that way. And one of the reasons is so that they can manage their costs, the utilization of this technology, and so forth. But what if in the future we have a scenario where if you have a 10-member team, only 2 of those members are Homo sapien, humans, and the other 8 members of the team are artificially intelligent agents? How will the role of business, humanity, but of HR shift if more and more of what we have to manage, onboard, recruit, discipline, and so forth, train, are not human? It's something to think about. Now, again, in my view, I haven't worked with any companies that's not only doing this, that have even thought about it. Something to think about. This is a slide that I love using. I could take the robot out of the human, and it started off with a work I did for the business banking team of one of our banks. Because they asked me, how can we automate the work that these bankers do? And I knew on the day that we had this session with them, a lot of them would sit there, arms crossed, because they've been bankers for 20, 30, 40 years. What is this AI stuff now? What is this automation stuff? How can you actually make that robot be better than I am? And we devised this triangle idea. It's quite simple, but essentially what I'm saying is any work that you do, your teams do, your colleagues do, can to some extent be divided into 3 sections like you see here. The bottom section is the very mundane, very repetitive, low value tasks. And we all have certain tasks like this to perform. I think the lower you are in the hierarchy, or the more junior you are, the more of your day-to-day job is filled with those kind of functions. And the higher you go up the hierarchy, the less and less your job is filled with those functions, because you have to focus on more strategic things. The middle layer is more, in that bank's case, but we can use it here as well, a digital interaction, whether it's with colleagues and clients, through an app, even email can count here and other things, a Teams call can count there. It's a bit more intelligent, but it's still more somewhat manual. But the point of this picture is the top of the pyramid is what uniquely only humans can do. And the question I ask these bankers is, first, identify the tasks that falling in the lower and middle section. And they said things like scheduling meetings with our clients, drawing reports, trying to work on insights so we can be a trusted advisor to our clients, administrative things. And I said, but in an ideal job, what would you like to spend more time on? And they all said unanimously, more face time with our clients. And that's why I say, okay, let's take the robot out of what you do, because if you're doing administrative, repetitive work, you're already doing robotic work. And you're doing work that robots and automation engines and aspects of AI can easily do already. And when these bankers realize that if we use this technology correctly and there's a process to really implement it and to do it right, they don't have to worry about scheduling the meetings because that can be automated. The reports and the insights. So we actually got to a point where they realized that we're currently, in this group's case, they're only able to spend 20% of their time with clients. We can flip that around where they can spend up to 80% of their time with clients because the technology is enhancing them to do the work that they should never have been doing. So when we create roles, when we advertise, when we recruit, I just want to encourage you to keep this in mind. And I know this is conceptual and in certain roles it could be quite tricky. But are we bringing people in to do work that we know in a year from now the robots will replace them? And when we bring people in, and even if it's lower level administrative work, how can we, irrespective of their experience or age, how can we utilize more of their human ingenuity, their problem solving, sometimes their gut feel, and set them free from the tedious work? Something to think about, even in your own role as an HR manager or professional or whatever your role is. If you could choose to be relieved from certain job functions, and that is often the reporting stuff, the admin stuff, what would you rather spend your time on? And how can we use technology to relieve you from those tasks? Because that takes the fear out of the AI's taking over. It's helping me to do the stuff I'm good at and not to do the 10 o'clock reports on a Sunday night for a 8 o'clock meeting on a Monday morning. Okay, here's our second poll. What is the biggest obstacle to AI implementation in HR? Now, again, if you haven't done it yet, it could be difficult to answer, but think about it. Is it in your organization? Is it because there's just not money or budget to do it, because it is expensive to do it? Is it because internally you don't have the expertise? It might even be that externally you can't find the right vendors that are experts. Or is it resistance to change? And this could be internal resistance. The staff are just not excited. In fact, they fear it. Often it could be at board level or exec level. They don't understand it. They don't want to bring in these tools. So just think about it. In your experience, where are the main obstacles? And again, Carleen, I'll wait for you to comment when there are enough answers.
Yes. So far, we've gotten 3 answers. I think, to be honest, I'm not surprised everyone's not saying all of the above. But so far, our answers range from resistance to change seems to be a big reason. I think you probably would have expected that. A few people are mentioning all 3 of them. And a lack of expertise has come up twice. But I think I'll give it maybe a minute or 2 for more people to respond. Obviously, for those who can see the question, there's also an option for you to give us another reason beyond what's been listed in the bullet list. But yeah, so far I see it's mostly a blend of all 3, Johan, with resistance to change seeming to pop up the most.
Okay. Carleen, while we wait for some more, that's exactly what I expected. I think resistance to change is one of the biggest problems because of a lack of understanding. Expertise, especially in our market, because we have such a so-called brain drain, especially when it comes to advanced technological skills. One of the, I think, challenges we have post-COVID is that, it's now easier than ever for me, for instance, and for others, to work in dollars for a global firm without having to immigrate, without having to resettle my kids in a school in England or America or whatever. We've already pre-COVID, I think, had a big problem with the right digital skills. Now it is even a bigger problem. And the challenge there is now we look to India and the Philippines and other countries to bring in cheap labor, whether it's virtually or in country. But we're not giving our up-and-coming youngsters, our school leavers, the opportunity to train and enter some of these roles because we kind of fixed the problem with a plaster. Budget is a problem. I've worked with many clients who have the money, but to create the business case for this technology and to actually convince the board and to show them that this technology can have an impact on the balance statement, on the bottom line, that is difficult. it is possible. However, I think resistance to change is the main one. Any other comments, Colleen, before I move on?
So I think, like I said, there's a blend of answers. All three seem to pop up as a problem. Resistance to change seems to be the biggest one, but there's everyone also mentioned, most of them also refer to the lack of expertise and budget. And I think they kind of all maybe lack of budget and expertise are a result of resistance to change, because people don't want to familiarize themselves, and they don't want to consider the fact, because lack of budget, as you mentioned, is a common thing to say, but is it lack of wanting to spend the budget or lack of the actual funds?
Yeah, very true. And I'll answer on some of these points as we get to the last few slides. But again, I think this is common across organizations. Then the question is, again, as domain leaders, as HR leaders, wanting to look at and implement this technology, how do we work against this in a positive way, this resistance to change? One of the ways.
Sorry, Johan, I apologize to interrupt you, but there's a very important comment that was just dropped, which I think could also influence your response. Is NOMSA says that an understanding of where AI could be used in HR could also be an obstacle, because if we can't explain how it can be used and understand how it can influence or change, it's difficult to convince anyone as well. So I think that's a very important point.
Maybe an initial point is, can we even use, or should we even use AI? Because what is that business case? And back to, are we using Excel in our current tools? But that's a great point. I think I know who NOMSA is. I saw on the invite list, and she does a lot of great work in this space as well. But a very valid point is, where can we use it? And the key here, if we think of change management, is if we start small, if we have a use case that makes a lot of sense and that will have a positive impact on people, that impacts the resistance to change, because now the dialogue amongst colleagues changes from we are scared of this stuff or we don't understand this stuff to, wow, I'm actually enjoying my job more. There's that 5 reports I had to do every day. I maybe just have to bring my expert view and review it and maybe make a few small changes. But the technology is helping me, and then the word starts spreading. Just on that point, what I've seen in a lot of, especially big corporates, when it comes to automation or AI initiatives, there is always resistance to change. A lot of companies, especially from the board level, mandate like a big bang across the business AI automation initiative, which is doomed to fail. But if you start in the right area and you start small and you get that excitement going, then then it's quicker for people to be positive about it. But what then happens is, where initially no one wanted to work with the automation or AI team, when the word starts spreading, then so many other business areas start inundating them that they don't even know where to start, because now everyone wants to automate. So that, again, that balance, where do you start in your business? What are the right functions? This is more a strategy discussion. It's how do you align your technology strategy to your overall business strategy, irrespective of whether it's AI or cloud or whatever. So very, very interesting. A great comment there, NOMSA, as well. I've got about half an hour left before Q&A. I'm going to go through some of these slides quickly. What is AI? We've all heard about the generative AI, or obviously it started with ChatGPT, and now we've got Bard and Bing, and there's about 600 different generative AI platforms. Think of it like this: as human beings, we are tool creators. That's also what sets us apart from other mammals or other, what's the word now? Not my word, I'll get to it. But even certain animals use tools, like a crow will, for instance, pick up a rock, throw it against an egg to break it so that they can eat the egg. It's basic tool use. But, or primates was the word I was looking for. Other primates also use tools in a basic way. But we create, because we have hands and we walk upright, we can use our hands or our knowledge to create tools. We've done it for thousands of years. And the tools we create are neutral. You know, if I have a flint knife, like some of these ancient pictures you see at the moment, I can use that knife to kill an animal, to feed my family, or I can use that knife to kill my neighbor when we have a dispute. The same is true for all technology we've ever created, and it's true for AI. It is a neutral technology that is used by humans for good or for evil. The challenge with generative AI is that for the first time in our history, we are creating tools that can by themselves also create tools. And currently that's more in the spectrum of software and coding. It's also going to start applying more and more to what we call the cyber physical world, like 3D printing, etc. But are we losing control of our tools because they are now able to create their own tools? Something to think about. And that's a bit more of the kind of future of AI picture. But we need to be careful. And again, no regulation, no laws in our country or pretty much worldwide around this kind of tool. We've got privacy, but we don't have AI regulatory frameworks, which is scary. So what I want to show you in this picture, about a year ago, my father, who's in his 80s now, asked me, what is this AI stuff that I'm doing? And I couldn't explain it to him. And it's not because he's stupid, he's just not in tech. But I realized then how often we who work in the field throw around these terms, like I said earlier, that we often don't even know what we mean. But how do you explain AI in the most basic way? And then I figured out 4 pictures, which I'll bring up now, to try and explain it to my dad. And I've used this actually a lot in my consulting and training work. And what I want to say in this slide is, and this is, again, we're really making it simple, but so that we can understand it. When we as humans perform work, we essentially do 4 main things. The one is, as you see in that top left icon, is we can see, we can read an email, an instruction, we can see the world around us, we make sense from it, and then we can, in the top right icon is we perform work, we execute work. So based on maybe an email instruction, we can then do what we're instructed to do. We also, bottom left, we understand language, not just different kind of languages if you're multilingual, but as humans, we have the ability to understand the nuances of language. So when you and I have a conversation, I can pick up whether you are frustrated, whether you are angry. Sometimes as humans, we pick up if there's potential deception. If you're lying to me, I can pick up whether you're excited or not. So natural language processing, which I'll get to now, can do the same. And then the last icon is learning. As humans, we keep on learning through our mistakes, through new information, through experience. And if I overlay it with these words, is what is AI? AI has the ability to see, we call it computer vision, whether that is a self-driving car that can recognize a stop street or a pedestrian, or whether it's as simple as extracting information from a document, making sense of it. We can then automate these tasks based on what we extract from the documents. Here we talk about robotic process automation. These days, more and more about intelligent automation is actually executing on the tasks. We have chatbots that can understand natural language. Whether you have Siri on your phone or a Google Home device, they are so good at picking up not just the words you're saying, but the meaning behind it. There's a huge use case for this in contact centers, for instance. And then obviously learning, machine learning. These algorithms, if you set it up right, through its interactions with the outside world, keeps on learning and keeps on getting better. But the next slide I think will be very important for you is when is a tool an AI tool? Because I'm sure many of you have already been confronted with this, whether it is from internal teams or from external vendors trying to sell you AI stuff. But when is it an AI tool and when is it not? And again, I'm going to give you 4 very basic principles here. A lot of the tools, in my experience, that vendors sell might have AI on the box, so to speak, but they are really automation tools. And here are 4 principles you can think about whether the tool is AI or not. A lot of tools will give you the view of the past, a BI tool, a kind of an image, representation of trends, etc. But then as a human, you take that historical trends and you use your expertise to predict the future. AI tools, if we set them up right, will have predictive capabilities based on not only past data, but more and more these days we have real-time interaction with our AI tools to predict the next best offer, for instance, etc. And we can talk about some of the use cases from an HR point of view. The other thing that AI tools can do that automation tools cannot is self-improvement, self-learning through its interaction. Obviously, we have to limit it, we have to set it up right, but it will keep on improving. And one example I can give you here is I worked with a company a mobile phone company, and you know, when you take out a mobile phone contract, you still have to physically sign the document. It's part of legislation. Then they actually scan that document, they put it somewhere on a folder, but now they need to start extracting this handwritten data, and these algorithms are becoming better and better at handwritten data. But this mobile contract was taken out in their Midrand store. But at the bottom of the document where the client had to sign, you know, name on this day at this venue, the handwriting looked like midfields. But the algorithm, through learning, picked up that because this contract was taken out in Midrand, the probability of this handwriting meaning Midrand and not midfields is very high. So it extracted the data then as Midrand and not midfields. Now, you can set up ways where you review these changes that the AI is making. But then it can also, back to my earlier point, use all the client's data to predict their future needs that they might not even know about. Patterns is another aspect of AI technology, is seeing patterns in your data that humans can't see. Think of if you're a bank and you have 100,000 clients, if you want to have real-time patterns and how are they spending, where are they spending it, on what are they spending it, what's their demography in real time. And you can actually generate offers to your clients in real time autonomously based on patterns. If your platform can show you patterns in your data that you might not have asked for, it's probably an AI tool and not an automation tool. And then lastly, answers. And these days with ChatGPT and Bing, we really are moving from a world of questions to answers. You know, when you Google something, you don't get the answer. You get homework. Google will show you the most probable web links that contains what you're looking for, and the algorithms are really good at it. But you're giving me a link to click on, then I still need to go read and see if that's what I was looking for. In the world of ChatGPT, and especially if you use the Microsoft's Edge browser with Bing, you still get the links, but you also get the answer. So if I say, when is the next game of the Springboks? Most search engines will give me the SuperSport link, the Rugby World Cup link, etc. It's somewhat helpful. But I don't want homework, just give me the answer. So if you ask the question in Bing, it will actually fairly accurately tell you when is the next game and at what time. So, and I'm going to talk about a use case from an HR point of view around this. Just keep in mind, HR tools predict, can self-learn, it shows patterns that you weren't looking for, considering, and it gives you answers to questions, not just links, etc. So hopefully next time when the vendors come, and we need the vendors, we need the expertise, are they really selling an AI tool, or is it an automation tool? And perhaps the automation tool is what you need, but don't think you're procuring an AI tool when it really is not. So some practical steps from a business point of view, and then we're going to hone in on more from an HR point of view before we end. Brief story I want to tell you, and I love the story. I tell this at every conference I speak at because I think it's so relevant. About a year ago, one of our local hospital groups, massive group, I think they have about 83 hospitals across our country, they pulled me in to help them with their strategy around automating the front desk. So if you've been to the hospital over the last few weeks or months, you will know that probably, even though you've been there a year ago, and this counts for your doctors as well, you most likely have to fill in the same documents again. It is a highly repetitive, highly admin-heavy function, and this is true for most reception areas, most businesses, and so forth. But as I walked into this meeting with all these execs, I could see on all the whiteboards they have extensively drawn pictures and strategies around how they can automate these 83 hospital front desk functions. And I looked at all of this, it was very impressive, and I asked them one question. And I said, have you actually spoken with the people whose jobs you are planning to automate? Have you actually gained their interpretation, their opinions? And these execs said to me, no, we haven't, because obviously they're going to push down this automation strategy from the top. And I said to them that I am not only not able to help them, I'm not willing to help them. And they said, why? And I said, because there is know-how and expertise in the heads of these people who've been doing that job for years, that you 15 layers above them in the organizational hierarchy will never even know about. That's why I love that TV series, Undercover Boss, if you've seen it, where the CEO will change his or her appearance and go work with the normal factory workers, etc. Because often we don't have a clue what people on the ground level do day to day. I then received their permission to have a lunch and a coffee with 20 of these administrators. It was here in Joburg in their main hospital, which is also their head office. And there were a number of things that they spoke about that technology could help them with. You know, they often have to go to one system, look for something, copy and paste it into a spreadsheet, go to another system, etc. That can be automated, even just with robotic process automation. But the thing that got to me, and this is why I love this story, their single biggest problem in this one hospital was that the printer was not close to them. So on average, they told me with every patient interaction, they had to get up 3 times, walk to the printer, either scan something, pick out a printout, etc. So as a so-called AI expert, you can imagine what was my recommendation. Let's just bring the printer closer. And I know it's such a silly and simple story, but I learned a huge lesson that day. Again, because we start off with, let's use AI, let's automate, let's use this tech. We sometimes tend to forget common sense principles. We tend to forget, or we might not even be interested in the work that the worker bees, the so-called normal people, are doing. So please remember this principle when you leave this session and when you look at the future of technology, when you look at all the promising things we're going to talk about before we end the session. What is your bring the printer closer moment? What is that simple thing that you can do to really help people in performing their work? It is very likely not technology. It is possibly just ways of working, simple things. So in looking at AI in HR, always keep in mind the printer, bring the printer closer moment. I've even printed a slide like this and it's on my wall, so that when I start figuring out how to help clients with their AI strategy, I'm reminded to go back to that. What are the simple things we can fix that technology cannot fix? 1 or 2 last slides before we go into more of the HR stuff. For me, when I look at an AI business strategy, this counts across the board for every business, but also zone in on your job function. I often draw these 2 circles to explain it. And the inner circle is what I call the smart technology ecosystem. This is where all the exciting stuff sits, the AI, ML, ChatGPT, cloud, all this stuff sits there. They are powerful, and if we use them correctly, they can revolutionize your business. The outer perimeter is the reason, it's the stuff we forget about, and it's the reason why these technological initiatives fail. Because organizational design, how will your organization, what will it look like in 5 years when you bring in AI, chatbots, etc.? Obviously, regulatory compliance in certain industries, the fact that your C-suite don't own these initiatives, don't even understand it. You know, this idea of reskilling and upskilling is thrown around so easily, but how do we actually do it? Are most people in your organization what I call upskillable? And it's not because they're stupid. Maybe they just don't want to do another kind of job. Maybe they're 5 years away from retirement. Why change what they do? How do we attract future skills in this Gen Alpha? I don't even keep up with where in the alphabet we are. Change management, etc. But I think if you look at this outer circle, the human resources function plays a huge role there from a multidisciplinary point of view and from a diversity point of view. We have to make sure that we get our people in our organization ready for the impact of this technology. And that's why I always advise my clients, don't just jump on the tech bandwagon. What will you do with all your people? Will you be able to upskill them? Will you be able to attract people? And so forth and so forth. So always forget that outer circle. That's the reason why the inner circle fails. And HR plays a huge role there. A few common sense tips before we move on to the last few slides. Don't start with the tech. I've already mentioned this. Don't get an AI tool and look for reasons to use it. Start with the problems. Simple. We tend to forget it. Use the tools you have. I've already mentioned it. Are you using Excel or your Microsoft Suite or whatever tools you have already? You might have your own L&D tools and so forth. That is great, but use those tools as best you can before you even start looking at AI tools. AI is not a silver bullet. It can't fix all your problems. It's limited still in its ability. Find the right use cases, and then remember that slide where I showed the non-human intelligence working alongside humans. What is the right balance between technology and humans in a team? What is that mix? How do we get the humans comfortable, excited about it? How do we alleviate their fears? And how do we manage the technology like we would have managed a human being? Simple principles. I'm sure I don't even have to tell you this, but we tend to forget it. Now, in the last 10 minutes, these are important slides, and as I said, you'll get the slides. I'm going to go through it somewhat quickly. Some of these ideas and use cases you might have already seen, you might already have started on the journey in your business, but it's a bit of an art of the possible. And some of the slides repeat some of the points because it goes over certain principles. But again, I think the best thing to do is after this session, when you get the slides, go through some of what I'm about to show you and think of where do you start on your journey? What can work in your business? What are you already doing? What are you doing that maybe is not working as well as you thought it would? So let's look at some of the ways in which we can transform the HR function when it comes to using AI across the function. Okay, here's one case study I want to mention very briefly. I've alluded to it earlier. I worked with one of our banks where they wanted to bring in a large language model like a ChatGPT into the bank. The problem with technology like ChatGPT is that there's no privacy. You don't know when you put in a prompt or when you copy and paste a spreadsheet into it where that data is going. So more and more businesses are building their own internal ring-fenced large language model. But the use case here was the following. You know that, so if I want to apply for leave, say I want to apply for paternity leave in January, I need to access a number of systems. I need to first find what is our leave policy again, if I can find it on our internal system. I need to consider what does the labor law say around paternity leave. I need to consider, do I have some annual leave that I can build up to January and maybe utilize that as well? Are there any public holidays during that time that I can utilize? And number 6 is, depending on your kind of work, but am I already booked on a project in that time? In other words, I need to first speak to my line manager. The time it takes to go through those 6 questions that you need, it just takes too long. Again, going from questions to answers. So what we then looked at is to use this large language model in this specific case, is to give that employee an answer, because now the system can look at leave policy, labor law, annual leave, etc., etc. So I want to go into my HR system and just say, like I would do with ChatGPT, I want to take leave in January, it's paternity leave from the 6th, what can I do? And it accesses in split second all the systems and it gives me the answer. Yes, you can take 5 days according to labor law. Company policy is 2 extra days. You will have 3 extra annual leave days by that time if you don't take any in the meanwhile and you book to a project with client X. Can I automatically schedule a meeting with your line manager to discuss it? That's what this technology can do. So imagine from an art of the possible point of view, what questions to answers using AI tools like this can do for the HR function. Okay, let me quickly go through some of these. Whoops, go back. Again, some of this you know. I would not be surprised if hopefully some of this you're already doing in your business. Administrative tasks, remember the bottom of that pyramid I showed you, the 3 parts. HR people like other job functions, but you have so much admin to do. Follow up, scheduling, looking at reports, dealing with line managers. I'm quite sure that even if you're in a senior position, the amount of administrative tasks or following up or managing your HR team is potentially immense. A lot of these tools can alleviate you from that, bring you closer to the top of the pyramid. Your employee experience, and I think here L&D, for instance, plays a role, and I'll touch on it again, is what is my experience when you onboard me? What is my experience from the start of when I contacted you with my CV? You know what I hate when it comes to recruitment is why do I, after I've sent you my CV, have to log on to your platform and copy and paste all the stuff you already have from my CV into your platform, press submit, and then it disappears in this dark hole. I'll most likely never hear from you. I might just get an automated email saying, thank you, we'll get back to you. Why don't you just use technology that extracts the data from my CV? I know you obviously want it in a certain format, but are you making it easy for me to approach your organization, to potentially join your organization? To what extent is my experience enhanced through your communication to me? How interviews are scheduled, how I'm getting ready for who I'm interviewing with, the feedback after the interview, and so forth, and so forth. And when it gets to the job offer and the signing of it, etc., highly automatable. Make it easy for me like you would with customers. Employees or potential employees should experience it much better. The decisions we make as a business, the decisions you make from an HR point of view, highly automatable, highly more accurate when you have the right kind of data on your people. And looking at our time, I'm going to quickly skip through some of this, but I would love to hear comments here, especially if you're doing this already. The how to do this is what I will end off with, some basic principles. But think of how your day-to-day job in this space and your team's day-to-day job can be enhanced by using tech in the right way, maybe using the tech you already have without even looking at AI. I've mentioned recruitment. I mean, performance appraisals. People hate that. It's so subjective. The stuff as an employee I have to fill in on the form that you should already know, because if you have the right data on me, I don't have to fill it all in. And then I've got some line manager and I catch him or her on a bad day and I don't get the right rating. We have to do a better job with people and the value of people by letting technology help us as humans make better decisions. L&D, I hate. Every big firm I've ever worked for, because it's typically like all education. It's a one size fits all. I don't even know why I have to go through this compliance training. It's boring. Yes, there's some videos and stuff, but how can we customize training, hyper-personalized training for our employees? Not change the curricula as such, but maybe I learn better through videos. You learn better through a mind map. Somebody else learns better through an audiobook, for instance. So take the content of the learning, hyper-personalize it on the fly, given what that individual needs. It's possible. Those platforms exist already. Talent management, I'm going to skip some of this. Okay, here's a third poll and then we're almost done. Which area in HR do you think would benefit the most from AI integration? And again, the answer is most likely them all. And I think what we would love to hear from you, if you look at these options, and there could be more or others that we don't mention here, in the work you do, given what I've already said about how we can potentially use this technology, where would you like to start? What's the ideal place to start in your business? And Caroline, I'll give it some time and wait what you see.
Yes, 100%. So I think, Johan, also just for maybe just for effectivity's sake, we still have about 22 minutes left. So I think what I would recommend is we keep going, and then we can rather use the last 10 minutes and an extra 10 minutes for Q&A for those who are open to stay behind.
Okay.
So the answer so far is talent management has come through twice, and then performance appraisal and talent management again, number 2 and 4. Recruitment and L&D, all of the above. Recruitment 3 and 4. I think you've got a healthy mix of all of these here. But yeah, so 3, let's see, 3 and 4, learning and development and talent management comes up quite a few times. Tanya Yonk says recruitment is such a lengthy process with advertising, sifting, interviews. There's so much more to recruitment. And Sue says performance appraisals and learning development. So I think it's a little bit of a blend, but it looks like talent management along with recruitment seems to be showing up quite a lot. So I'll quickly just scan through them. So we've got talent management, recruitment and learning and development, recruitment, performance appraisal, learning and development.
Okay. Yeah, I think they're all great candidates. I think for me personally, maybe maybe I'm wrong, but I think the area with the most repetitive administrative kind of work is possibly recruitment. And not even knowing sometimes where you are in the process, because it's such a chaotic thing. You know, you're getting in 500 resumes to map that to the specific job profile, to actually look at the viable candidates. So I'll give you one example of a use case I worked on here. You get some tools, for instance, where you can preset a video recorded interview, you know, that initial filter interview where the person looks into the camera, there is a person on the other side that's an AI that looks very human, that asks them certain questions. It puts them at ease. It's not just a survey you're filling in. It's quite conversational. But based then on, and this is also an ethical question, which we'll get to next, is to what extent do you want to use the data from people's facial expressions, their micro expressions, to determine whether they are a suitable candidate. But you do get such platforms. So somebody would do, for instance, a 10 or 20-minute initial interview with a recorded AI. The AI will analyze what they are saying, pick up potential deceit in their voice, their facial expressions, and so forth, and then will give you a filtered view of the 100 people I interviewed as an AI. Here are the 10, also mapping to their resumes and the job spec that I think you should look at. The challenge with that is, what if you caught me on a very, very bad day? So what will my facial expressions look like? And again, as a human interviewer, an experienced interviewer with empathy, you can most likely pick up that this person, like, are you okay? You look, that something happened. And I'll never forget, I was working at a company, and one of my good friends was an ideal candidate for a specific role we had. We brought him in for an interview. I distanced me from it because I know him so well. And after the interview, my colleagues said that he didn't do well at all. Why did I even recommend him? And then when I phoned him afterwards, he was in tears, and I said, what happened? And he said that morning, before he came for the interview, him and his wife learned that they lost their baby. I think she was about 12 weeks along. So obviously now this person walks into the interview. He almost shouldn't have come. He should have phoned us and said, can we do it a week later? But huge turmoil, and it could be health issues. It could be people going through a divorce. I mean, we know these things. Will these AI systems pick that up, as well as an experienced, empathetic human being looking at that candidate, trying to connect with them? But again, even if it's not the AI doing the interview, the managing of the paperwork through the process, the scheduling, the following up, highly automatable. And there are some great tools. There are actually fairly low-cost tools. You can build it into your Microsoft tools already. Some of you hopefully are using it already. But if you have a team of people physically, manually reading through the resumes, you're doing it wrong. You can use technology to actually show you the top 10% of the resumes, and only on them let a human with experience look at it and determine what you want to do. But then reaching out to them, scheduling that interview, etc., all the following up steps is highly automatable. Same with performance appraisals. It's obviously a bit more tricky than recruitment, but the steps that can be automated around that, taking that subjectivity of the human out of it. A lot of tools, I think talent management, but L&D is maybe personally where I've done most of my work. Recently had one of our large insurance companies, they're looking now at augmented reality or virtual reality, these goggles we put on for training. You actually walk into this virtual environment where you interact with people. This is for the call center, and where you also deal with certain difficult clients, etc. Great way to teach practical. Problem is those goggles it's like $5,000 a goggle. So how do you roll it out on your company? But again, the technology can do it. The technology's become cheaper and cheaper. But where do you start? And do you, in this case, need augmented reality? We can create a virtual environment on a normal two-dimensional screen for certain things that we want to teach people in the role. So it's making the right decisions and not jumping on the augmented reality bandwagon as such. All right, let's look at a few of these things almost toward the end. And I think one of the things I want to say here is, as HR leaders, the amount of responsibility and ownership you have on this tech or AR journey is huge. Again, you might work in an organization where you're not allowed to make the right strategic decisions, where it's forced on you by the execs or by your technology department or by your vendors, for instance. But the ownership of that strategy around technology in your space must lie with you, because you know or should know your business better than anyone else in the business. You should understand what it will take to bring the printer closer for your team if that's what's needed. But one of the things to start with is best practices. You can find that fairly freely on the web, sometimes with your vendors, given your specific industry, maybe given your regulatory environment. For instance, if you're in a bank, it's highly unionized, highly regulated. You can't be such a cowboy with tech as maybe in other industries. but what is the best practices for adopting AI? A lot of it will reflect to some of the, call it common sense things I've already said. The obstacles that you might typically engage with or face, again, it could be specific to your industry. It would be nice to, some of these obstacles you can obviously imagine beforehand, but to find from best practices and other information. And this all forms part of your strategy, which I'll touch on toward the end, because you have to use somebody or use your internal team to build a proper strategy that incorporates all of these things. But what are the obstacles we will most likely face? And let's figure out what we're going to do before we face them. It could be that you are working for a mine and that the people, the communities living around the mine will be affected by technology. So it could be because it impacts the quality of water, quality of air around them, etc., etc. That's one example. But how it impacts people, your clients, your workers, we need to know what obstacles we will face, the resistance for change, etc. And a big thing here, and that comes back to the starting small story, is you're going to face obstacles, you're going to make mistakes, some of your initiatives will fail, you're going to learn from it. But be proud about the success stories. Share that with people. Let people share it themselves. Empower them, whether it's internal webinars or small little videos or town halls or whatever. Let people not hear from the execs or outside vendors. Let them hear from their peers, their colleagues, about how technology has positively changed them. And keep on looking for small little success stories. Keep on almost hammering that message in, despite all the obstacles and the trouble you're going to face potentially. There will be success stories. We as people identify with people. Even if the story is a mother who says, I'm a single mother, for me to get my kid to primary school, to get to work on time, to work doing all these reports, then to get back in time. But because of the automation that's been brought into my day-to-day job, I actually am not that stressed anymore to get to work on time, because by the time I get there, 80% of my reports are already initially formulated. I need to double check it, maybe edit some of it, etc. So now it's a mother telling the story, or a father telling the story, or whatever, somebody with healthcare problems, and their work's getting better through the use of technology. We as people have a canny way of resonating to other people's stories. So keep on spreading the positive news, because there must be, because if there's no positive news, if there are no good stories about the tech you're using, then something is seriously wrong. But the positive story is maybe not, we've changed our whole business. It could be certain individuals, certain teams who are finding some benefit from this technology. Again, this is most likely some things you've already read or potentially are using already. And this applies across business functions, but are you harvesting as a business the right kind of data on your employees? And are you doing it responsibly? Because that responsible element, and it's not just privacy or POPIA, but are we ethically, in other words, are we harvesting information that we should have and should use? Or are we harvesting information that's not really relevant? So it could be, for instance, if they use a company laptop, what websites are they looking at? Of course, you want to make sure that it's not pornographic. Of course, you want to make sure that they don't upload information onto a Dropbox folder or a Google Drive folder from a privacy point of view, from an IP protection point of view. Do you allow your employees to use ChatGPT? Because most companies, for instance, are grappling with that. But on there, it's a behavioral science conversation. How are employees behaving? And to what extent can we use surveillance technology, which is tricky, and there's an ethical question around determining what is this individual like? What is it that will trigger them positively or negatively? And how can we use that data to better manage them, to improve our L&D, etc., etc. The same applies to having data on your current workforce and workforce planning. Do we even know if the talent to perform jobs in a year that we will need in a year from now, do we have that talent already? Do we know our people well enough? Or do we have to upskill, or do we have to go outside? The data we have on people should be able to answer this question if we have the right data strategy in our business, but also in the HR area. Retention, again, you can already, it's again human behavioral science. The words people use on their emails. Now, again, is it ethical to extract all the emails they send? But the nuances around what they're saying, the internal emails, levels of frustration, words that they're using, words like CV, job, etc. Do we want to pick up on it? And what do we want to do with it? Are we going to actually close them down, so to speak, that they feel we are watching over them like a schoolmaster? Or can we use this data in a way responsibly that we can maybe come with a different nuanced statement to them, or an approach to say, because you're so frustrated, what's the positive view? What can we make? And that leads to an interaction based on the data, based on their behavior, the times they arrive at work, even the demeanor when they arrive at work, if you use facial recognition technology and so forth. There are myriad possibilities here, but it edges on whether it's ethical or not, and we have to really think through it. And that brings me to the ethical part, which is almost the end, and then we're going to look at some next steps. Ethics in AI is a huge topic. As I've alluded to already, in South Africa, in Africa, and pretty much most of the world, we don't have ethical standards or ethical regulatory frameworks around the use of AI technologies. The EU have been working for 3 years on the EU AI Act, and we hope in the next year to actually see that act come to fruition, to actually be enforced over European Union companies. That act says things like Popia says already, like, you can only use my data for the intended purposes that I gave you permission to use, but it also makes AI explainable. In other words, if I apply for credit and I'm declined by an automated decisioning system, as a consumer, I have the right to go to my bank and say, explain how that algorithm got to that decision. And did it use the right data on me? Can you imagine how organizations will be inundated with these kind of queries because of the decisions that AIs are making? The question for me around this is, if we think of the power of technology, it is not, can we do it? The ethical question is, should we be doing it? Even if we won't get into trouble, there are no laws against it, no one will even know about it. But using the data we have on people, the way we can actually formulate a persona around them, their weaknesses, their aspirations, etc. What do we do ethically that is relevant to our business or not? What kind of power do we have over them? Biases in our data sets is such a big topic. Do you know that even today, facial recognition systems struggle to recognize female faces and people with darker skin tones? There's a great series on Netflix called Coded Bias. It's worth watching, and it talks exactly about this problem, coded bias. If you ask me, for instance, to build an algorithm, to say we work at a bank, and you say we've got 500,000 clients, we want to look through the data and determine which of these clients are actually families, because we are looking at promoting, so it could be a certain insurance product or educational products, etc. Let's identify the families in our vast amounts of data. So what I would do, because this is my worldview, is I will write an algorithm that recognizes men and women constructing a family who may or may not have a kid. Because that's my worldview. That's then when I need a colleague to say, Johan, we know you don't mean it in a bad way, but I'm in a same-sex relationship. That's also a family. Or somebody might say, I'm a single parent. Or somebody might say, we're in a relationship and we don't want to have children, and so forth and so forth. So I would build the biases of my worldview into this algorithm. And that's why I keep on going back to a multidisciplinary team, multi-ethnic team, obviously a gender representative team, a core team, to build and look at these platforms. We have to have legal involved, HR obviously, organizational design and others, not just the techies. But what biases might you have in your industry? So you might work in mining, which is dominantly a male-driven kind of organization or industry. Will the algorithms be built in a way that won't see the potential benefit of females in certain job functions, etc.? We will build biases into it as long as we know about it and as long as we find ways of mitigating it. And then privacy and security, don't just do it because the law says like that. You know, Popia, have you seen it enforced yet? Because, you know, the law says that if you lose your client's data, or if they're hacked, that you are liable to, as a director of the company, you're liable to a 10-year fine, a 10-year prison sentence or a 10 million rand fine. What have we seen over the last 2 years? Massive breaches with TransUnion, Transnet, Dischem, and the list goes on and on. Not one of those cases have been prosecuted yet. So I feel like Popia is like a bulldog with no teeth. But we shouldn't do it because the law says it. We should do it because we are protecting people. And as we almost conclude, we're going to do this poll, and then I'm going to have some concluding thoughts about what do you tomorrow morning when you wake up, and then we'll look at some Q&A. So how important is it to address ethical considerations and minimize biases related to AI and HR? Now, I guess having set the scene, I hope you all will answer the same thing. But do you honestly think it's that important, or is it maybe not yet that important? And then again, Carolina, I'd love to hear what people have to say here.
Yes, let me quickly drop our, I think everyone can obviously see on the screen as well, but everyone says from very important to extremely important.
Okay, good. Those are good answers. Luckily, no one said not important at all, because that'll be a problem.
We have, so Dan says somewhat, maybe the bias should be addressed in people. So I think somewhat is because of the biases. That, yeah, the majority is responding to very important to extremely important.
And then the question is, how do we minimize it? And again, it's not a technology per se conversation. You do have platforms that can pick up biases in your data. It is the first place to start, as I've already said, make sure that the core team considering this tech is multi-ethnic, multidisciplinary, etc., because other people in our team will pick up the way we maybe ask a question in a poll, or the kind of data we harvest from people, that it's not representative of them. And we need their advice to help us to try. And also looking at privacy and ethics and biases is not a once-off or an annual exercise. It's a continual exercise. As your database grows, as you're harvesting more information, and as these machines make decisions on what to do with the data. So very, very important. Okay, so a few more slides and we're almost done. Now, again, some of this is somewhat repetitive and it's somewhat common sense. What are your HR challenges? Forget about the tech. What are the things that you would like to fix, whether it's tech or not? That's that needs assessment. The AI strategy, and on that I could most likely have spoken a few more hours. But you can already conclude from some of the things I've said. What are the key things that needs to be in your strategy from an HR point of view for the future? How do you use this technology? Where do you start? And then this monitoring. That's one of the problems I've seen with especially AI tools, because we think they're so smart. Unless we constantly reteaching some of these algorithms, unless we constantly review where it's going wrong, where it's making the wrong decisions, it will essentially, we'll start losing control over it, or it will become totally useless to us. So again, it's not a silver bullet. Don't plug it in and there we go with AI. Constantly, it's like a human, really. It's like in a way, AI is like AI has the intelligence of around about an 8-year-old child at the moment. So how many times as parents do we have to not say pick up your socks, switch off the lights, etc. We have to do the same with AI. Part of your strategy is how often do we review how decisions are made by the algorithm? How do we keep on teaching the algorithm? How do we increase its reach, etc., etc. Okay, here's the one slide that I wanted to get to. Okay, what now? Okay, hopefully this was beneficial. Again, I think that in the slides, it's a lot more food for thought that when you read through them, because I had to go through some of them quickly. But when you now walk out of this webinar, or when you wake up tomorrow, what are some of the next steps? And I've already alluded to it. Number one, this technology is powerful. We have to be careful, but it's not nearly as powerful yet as we think it is. It won't solve all of our problems. Utilize your common sense and your wisdom and your experience in deciding if you need this tech at all, or where you might need it. Bring in the right expertise in the right kind of a engagement model. Make sure that it's a win-win, especially when it's an external vendor. Don't let them just come and sell you licenses and switch it on and there you go. Start small in the right space. Get people excited when they see the benefit of what this technology can do to them. Think about the future as we get more and more teams mixed up with non-human intelligent entities. How will it change the way we manage the humans? And will it be tech or HR's role to manage the non-human entities, even though it's technology? How do we use the data that we have on our people responsibly to better serve them when it comes to upskilling them, identifying them for future roles and so forth? So really, and also demystifying AI. I think if that's the one thing is this that you can take from this. While we can use this tech, there are many things it can do. First, it can alleviate us from a lot of the mundane stuff that we are doing. It's more accurate, it moves faster, but it will not replace me because of my own expertise and because of kind of the just human intelligence, if you would. And how do we keep on focusing it ethically and responsibly, making sure that not just our employees and our teams, but society at large benefits from this? And then where do you start on that strategy? And I've given you a few pointers there. Don't start with the tools. Use the tools you have. Realize it's limited. Start in the right place. And that's essentially it, Carleen. It's quite a lot. I hope people's attention spans are still with us. Remember, I can't see anyone. But I think I'll stop sharing now and see what we can maybe do from a Q&A point of view.
Yes, so we do have 3 questions that I've saved from the chat so far. So I'll read. Would you want me to address all 3 so that you can see where you want to start, or do we take them one by one?
If there's time and if it makes sense, I think let's do it one by one.
Okay. So just to the audience, we are going to quickly run through Q&A. For those who can still, stay with us to contribute to this, please do so. For those who have to run to their next meeting, we just want to thank you for attending, and we are going to share the recording of the slides with you. And also, for those who might be exiting the session, we are going to select a winner from the lucky draw that will get a free consultation from Professor Steyn on AI for their business. Okay, but to address the questions, I'm going to start with Annette's question. What do you think is the right area to start within AI?
Is that to use it in your business or to start working in the AI industry? I don't know what maybe you can...
I think to use in the business. Where's the right place to start?
I think firstly, you have to determine whether you actually need it or not, because there's a good chance that many businesses right now don't need it. Coming back to, are you using the tools that you actually have efficiently? My recommendation would be that in all businesses, we have certain functions that is relevant to all businesses: HR, procurement, legal, and so forth and so forth. Irrespective of the industry you work in, look at the use case that will benefit people, that will make a financial impact. So in other words, don't make just the technology decision, is work with it, then with a vendor or with your own team. If we use this tech correctly, we will most likely save X amount of man hours or these expenses, etc. I don't think there is a one-size-fits-all place to start in any business. Where will it make an impact, especially if you start small? But a good place is in some of your, call it back office kind of functions, your common functions that all businesses have. I would say that. Another thing to think about is, in the context of today, what will have the best positive impact on your staff, but also from a business point of view, what will have the greatest impact on your clients when it comes to understanding them better, serving them better, gaining market share, etc. But first question is, do we even need it? And then we start looking at where in the business do we start needing it. I know it's not a definitive answer, but hopefully that'll help a little bit.
Right. Okay. So the next question is, what are the risks, if any, in terms of data sourcing and violation of personal privacy when using AI? Do you think you have addressed this when we talked about the POPI aspect? So if you want to go with this one, we can, or we can go to the third question.
Briefly comment, Colleen. Again, important. I did touch on some of it. Look, there is the reputational legal risk from a POPI Act, although there's a good chance at this stage nothing will happen to you as a business. But I think trust, if people can't trust you with their data, whether it's your staff or your clients, that is a huge problem. And I think that's maybe the biggest impact at this stage, is not trusting you with my data and then trying to limit in what you can harvest from me, and that won't help your business case around this technology.
Awesome. And then we've got a question: what additional skills must HR professionals chase for them to become AI proficient?
Yeah, so a great question. One of my friends who's a doctor said something that I'll never forget. She said, AI will never replace doctors, but AI will replace doctors who don't use AI. So can we say the same in the near future, that it will never replace HR professionals, but will it replace those who are not familiar with or know how to use the technology? So I would say don't become an expert, don't become a machine learning engineer or a data analyst. Be familiar with the terms around this tech, be familiar with what the tech can do or not, and there's so much on YouTube and Udemy and other platforms. Just become familiar with it and have a business mindset on how you can use the tech to fix business problems. I would say that is it. Become familiar with it. So when a vendor or a colleague starts throwing terms around, at least know what they're talking about. That's a great place to start, irrespective of where your expertise goes. And also know the balance between what the tools can do better than you and what only you can do good because of your human expertise. I hope that answers the question.
Then we've got a question here from Tanya. She says, where can you find or how do you know which AI platform to use for the topics we touched on now? For instance, like for recruitment or performance reviews.
So I would say on the one hand, there are specialist platforms. In other words, focusing, so it's a recruitment platform, and that's what it's good at. But the question then is integrating it into your business, into your other functions. Your larger tool sets, again, like Microsoft, IBM and others, have very interesting capabilities. So if you are a Microsoft shop, and I don't work for them and I don't get anything out of promoting them, but speak with your tech people or your account managers at Microsoft around which Microsoft tools can we use in recruitment. The nice thing is if you have one platform across the various HR functions, the integration, the implementation and using the data across them is so much easier than buying 6 or 7 different platforms. A big challenge that I've seen with these specifically specialized platforms is they're often Northern European or American. They're good, but they're not always that usable for our specific nuances in our market. And that's something to think about. Will the American platform be suitable for our challenges in our country and with your workforce? But start with the platforms you have and find out whether you just haven't plugged in that part of a platform for, say, recruitment yet. I would start there.
Okay, then we've got, I'm familiar with and have used ChatGPT, but that's about it. Where or how can you use other AI platforms, apps or systems? Do you pay for it and how does it work? So perhaps I think we can address that question by suggesting a few more platforms that they can go explore of similar nature.
Yes, look, most platforms are free. Question is, are they really free? Because what are you paying? You're paying with your data. Now, that's why Gmail is free and Waze is free, because you're submitting freely your data. There are some, if you go look for generative AI platforms, as I said, I think there's about 600 at the moment, and some of them focus on music creation or text to image, things like that. Are there generative AI platforms specific to the HR function? I would be surprised if they're not. I have not seen any, and at this stage, I wouldn't necessarily trust them. What is the use case? So it could be automatically generating a letter of employment, for instance, et cetera, et cetera. I still don't know if I want to trust algorithms for something that important. There are great algorithms for your day-to-day work, automating maybe a great response on an email, or maybe if you want to, and you can use ChatGPT for this, or Microsoft will soon hopefully roll out their Auto or Copilot, where you can say for instance, you must tell somebody that they are declined, that you're not going to offer them the job. How can I do it in the most empathetic, wonderful, or best way? Because I might not know how to do it. So those are ways you can use it. I don't think there are many generative AI platforms focusing on HR at the moment, other than content creation kind of tools.
I think, and then we can maybe do 2 more questions. So this question I think is nice. Should we master simple automation before introducing AI?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because AI, once you get automation right, you can build AI on that. So again, remember that AI tools conversation I had, because what does automation do? It's rules-based. You program it to, if this happens, do that, take that document, scan it here, email it to that person. AI on top of that is more the decision-making based on parameters that change, situations that change based on its learning. So absolutely, you'll most likely see, almost everyone on the call here, if you implement the right kind of automation tools in the right way, it will most likely solve all your business problems at this stage. Not even AI yet, but it's a great step toward getting to AI. So the answer is yes, automate first before you AI.
Awesome. And I think then we can take on this last question. Let me just quickly go to it. How do you help HR teams understand what AI actually is so that we can make informed decisions about using AI?
I think training is important, and that's where I work with CTU often, as where we look at, do we create a training course for HR people, or do we look at potentially creating a course specific to your company or industry? But it's really, you need somebody like me, but there are many others now much better than me who have worked in the field, who've seen it gone wrong, to take you on a journey. And what that course looks like, we can discuss. But firstly, it's familiarizing people with the technology, with the terms, showing them some use cases. Often it's great to bring in some videos and external documents. It's learning, it's self-learning, but it's also being taught. And I think, again, if there's interest in, Colleen, you can maybe comment on that, is how we can, after this session, if there's need for more training, how we can maybe work together on that.
For sure. And I think just one, and I think this is a question on behalf of the group, for those who are still here. Professor Steyn, what are the AI platforms that you have familiarized yourself with and that you would recommend our attendees go explore beyond ChatGPT?
Yes. So again, I'm going to come back to Microsoft and Google. There's a huge AI capabilities in those platforms these days, and it will increase. Same with Amazon's AWS. There are even, for instance, there are so many platforms. There's Canva, C-A-N-V-A, and some of you might have used it. It's great for creating leaflets and pamphlets, etc. But I see they've also now brought in large language model capabilities where you actually prompted what you wanted to create. So that's great. There are interesting tools around, for instance, reviewing legal documents and bring out the main, say you get a 300-page non-disclosure agreement. What are some of the main things I need to look at, etc., etc. But I use Microsoft's Bing more and more these days because it is based on current data, where ChatGPT is based on 2001 and earlier, although they said they're changing it. Bing is also, for me, great in that it actually gives you the references of where it found the information, so you can double check it. But when it comes to the course creation, the articles I'm writing, from a ideas generation point of view, I use Bing a lot. But then, again, what it won't replace is my experience on top of it, and sometimes chopping and changing it. But even for my business, I run everything on Google. I've automated a number of things, so stuff is out there already. You get more complex things for other business needs, but if you want to use it from a day-to-day basis, the tools are there already. We're just not using it, I think.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think we can conclude our session there. For those who are still here, thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you're free to reach out to Professor Steyn. Either by LinkedIn, you'll see his details are still available on the invitation that you received, but we will also share information in the email that we will follow up with. But yeah, thank you so much for everyone who's attended. Again, on behalf of CTU Corporate Training Unlimited, we want to thank Johan for supporting us in today's session, and please reach out to us if you are involved in learning and development in HR. CTU has a lot of corporate solutions relating to learnerships, short skill courses, soft skills that we address on a company basis. So please reach out to us, or you can also reach out to Professor Steyn for AI assistance, especially for consultation within your business. But yeah, thank you so much. That concludes our session for today.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.